How did you become a witch? Are your family witches? How can someone be a witch in the modern day? Are witches real? These are questions that I get asked so regularly. It's prompted me to make this video today where I'm going to tell you exactly how I became a witch. So to answer one of the first questions that I get asked very frequently is, do I come from a family of witches? I do not come from a family of witches. However, one of the key caregivers in my life, my grandmother, has a very witchy nature to her, although she herself would not describe herself as a witch. I watched her doing all kinds of very witchy things, at least in my eyes, growing up, and this has been a massive influence on my craft. Things that I saw her do regularly included water divination with a dowsing stick made from a willow tree. She also did energy work and healing work, and had very strong healing powers. She had amazing abilities with plants, and every home that we lived in always had the most spectacular garden that you can imagine. She also included many medicinal plants amongst our gardens, so this was very normal for us to use herbal remedies, and I grew up learning about herbal remedies and also everything you can know about these plants, including their original scientific names. My grandmother would also speak and communicate with both plants and animals, and she would do this either just speaking normally or also in song. It was very normal for me to see her singing to plants. Every single windowsill in our home, particularly in the kitchen, was covered with plants that she was growing as saplings, and also our kitchen was the intensive care unit for any plants that she found that were struggling. My grandmother was also such a magpie. She would keep little rocks that she found, shells, feathers. She also had a beautiful collection of colored glass bottles, which was placed against a window, and that was always one of the most magical places of the home. I remember spending hours just sitting in front of these glass bottles, absolutely mesmerized. As a child, I always remember casting spells. I was absolutely obsessed with plants and animals. I kept a herb garden of my own from a very young age that I tended to. I loved reading books on herbs and plants, and I was always making my own concoctions and remedies. I also spoke to animals myself, and I met many of my animal guides as a child, and this involved a number of very traumatic initiations that I went through where I had lessons to learn, but that's a topic for another video. I also grew up with a sense of deja vu constantly because I would dream things that would come to pass. And I always had a very, very deep connection to nature. My first encounter with, formal witchcraft was through Wicca, as I think it was the case for many of us 90s witches. Back then it was not easy to get information on witchcraft or anything like that, and I also came from an extremely religious background in a very, very small town, so I had to really struggle to get any more information. Eventually I found a bookstore, and I would just sit in the bookstore because I couldn't afford any of the books myself, but I would sit there and I would read everything that they had on witchcraft and Wicca in particular. My favorite authors back then were Scott Cunningham, Silver Ravenwolf, and Starhawk, and these books formed the foundation of my emerging craft. This was also when my craft started to evolve into an actual spiritual craft, complete with the tool set that I would reach for when I was in need. But I was also really struggling with some inner conflict about calling myself a witch. I came from a religious background where this was absolutely not permitted, and I believed that I would be damned to hell if I even read these books that I was reading. Yet they spoke so deeply to my soul that I just could not help myself. And eventually, over time, I started to shed my old skin and started to feel more and more comfortable with calling myself a witch. When I was 16, one of my best friends introduced me to her sister, who was a Wiccan, and we formed our first coven. This was such a liberating, wonderful time for me because finally I could talk openly and freely with other people who walked the same spiritual path that I walked. We also had many adventures and misadventures in spellcraft, in ritual. Together we learned a lot about witchcraft in general, about paganism, and about walking the Wiccan path. One major part of my teen witchcraft experience was when I started to learn how important witchcraft was for me personally. Witchcraft became an absolutely essential tool for survival for me. I was struggling with PTSD, depression, self-harm, and substance abuse, and witchcraft became how I managed everything that I was going through. Truly believe today I would not be alive. I would not have gotten through that time without the hope, the accountability, and the empowerment that witchcraft has given me. The next phase of my witchcraft began when I started at university. I studied sciences, so my background is in infectious diseases, immunology, biochemistry, genetics, etc. and the like. I have multiple degrees in these fields. And this is when my witchcraft journey took on a more atheistic flavor, so I applied what I call the placebo magic paradigm to my approach to witchcraft. I was spending a lot of time as well on forums for Naturalistic Paganism, Humanistic Paganism, and I also identified as what I call a Sagan pagan. So this is a form of paganism that's deeply influenced by the amazing scientist and educator Carl Sagan. Everything that I studied at university was rooted in my spirituality. My thirst to understand more about nature as a pagan was what drove everything that I did. And I even brought my spirituality with me into the laboratory. I never felt more like a witch than when I was in the lab, mixing up all manner of potions and running my experiments. My life as a scientist is very much rooted in my spirituality as a witch and a pagan. My craft then became, I guess, what I would call more evidence-based. I felt at that time as though I needed to back everything up that I was doing in scientific research. I read widely on the research done on spirituality and religion, and also on the tools that are widely used in spirituality and religion, including meditation and prayer, chanting, and so forth. And I found that there is a lot of evidence to support these practices in enhancing and enriching the human experience. A key part of my practice at this time was suspension of disbelief. So the idea that I needed to believe in a spell when I cast it in order for it to work, it just went out the window. Rather, I didn't force myself to try to believe anything, but I would give myself the opportunity to do the spell in a ritualistic manner and just suspend my disbelief during the process. This is one of the key tools that is used in chaos magic, and so I also identify as a chaos magic practitioner. It was during my studies as well that I encountered what would become my next coven. There were a few of us that would meet and talk about all witchy things. We also honored the Wheel of the Year together. A few years ago, I went through another horrific and profound spiritual awakening. I had a near-death experience and went through some very, very tough personal challenges, and it was absolutely witchcraft that got me through this period of my life, just like it had before when I was a teenager. What followed a few years later was a period of rebirth and recovery, rediscovering my craft anew and really leveling up my craft in a major way. What does my craft look like today? Every single step of my witchcraft journey or phase of my witchcraft journey still has an impact on my craft as I practice it today, including Wicca, although I do not identify as a Wiccan today, including atheistic witchcraft and humanistic paganism and naturalistic paganism. Being a witch means taking accountability for my actions. It means also choosing empowerment over a victim role. It means changing the reality around me and the world around me rather than being a passive, unconscious observer of the world. Being a witch means that I cast spells and I do rituals. Being a witch also means to me that I have a very close connection to nature, and I spend a lot of time in my local natural areas. I also love to set up altars in the wild. If you follow my Instagram, you will know that about me. Being a witch also means that I have a very, very strong and clear code of ethics. I honor the wheel of the year, which are the pagan festivals of the year. The moon has a massive and profound impact on my craft. Being a witch also means that I don't necessarily fit in. In the past, always feeling like an outcast used to be something that I struggled with. Today, it's something I actively embrace. I love being different, I love being a witch, and I love the fact that I can be here today in radical self-love and tell you I am a witch. I've always been amused at how people would tell me that witchcraft is just a phase. Do you think it's still a phase? So now I'd really love to hear from you. Are you a witch? I would love to hear your own witchcraft journey. Does witchcraft interest you? Have you ever cast a spell and seen some results from it? Have you ever had any magical experiences? Do you have a craft, and what does your craft look like? Please let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please leave a like, please subscribe to my channel for more weird and witchy videos, and please hit that notification bell so that you never miss a video. Thank you for watching.